What's going on, guys? You guys just saw a teaser for the Redline video that I just put out not too long ago. So if you guys actually want to see the full thing, make sure to click the link up above or down below. You'll be able to find it. And so in this video, we're going to be touching on the color grading process that I did for this video. Allow me to preface though, I am in no means an expert when it comes to Resolve. I'm still very, very new to it. This was actually one of the first kind of bigger projects that I did within Resolve, where I went in and I edited utilizing it, I color graded utilizing it. The whole kind of process was done within Resolve. Prior, I've been kind of utilizing Premiere and kind of mixing and matching between Premiere and Resolve. That process, although is doable, is just very, very tricky to do. I'm just going to kind of show you the settings that I put in place, my workflow in terms of what I did to kind of achieve the sort of look that I have. And please feel free to let me know what I could have done better, if you have any recommendations, or just want to kind of let me know in terms of what your process is like when it comes to color grading in Resolve. Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's hop into the grade. So in the color tab, if we hop over first to my project settings, I of course have things set to DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate for my timeline color space, and then my output color space is Rec 709A. Once we have that in place, what I then did is I linked all of my footage based on the camera that was utilized. And so for pretty much 99% of this piece was all FX3. So I went and I grabbed all the clips that were FX3 based, and you can kind of see them based off of this icon here. If I were to right click and check over in groups, there were 3 different cameras that were utilized for this piece. We have FX3, a Nikon, and a Blackmagic camera. Nikon was actually not seen in the actual piece itself. I have it on my desk. This little kind of point and shoot camera that I've been trying to kind of implement a little bit, just to kind of get that old kind of vintage vibe. I did get a couple shots with this. It just kind of didn't really work out for this piece, so you actually don't see any of it. But at the time when I was grading and stuff like that, I was trying to implement it a little bit. So there is a group called Nikon in there, but then the beginning shots where you're seeing kind of the details of like the car and stuff like that, that's actually with a Blackmagic camera. I went ahead and linked all of the footage based on what camera was utilized. And so for all of these shots, specifically at the event, are all FX3. So I basically just linked every single one of those. What that then allows me to see is, at first, when you don't link them, you have only 2 dots up here. You have your clip, and then you have your timeline. Once you group something, you then get a group pre-clip, and then you get a group post-clip. And so this is really good because then it allows me to do specific edits within a particular group so that all of the footage within that group is actually being affected. And so what I wanted to be able to do is, for my group pre-clip, I wanted all of my footage from an FX3 to be converted from S-Log3 to DaVinci Wide Gamut DaVinci Intermediate. And so, of course, if you know anything about Resolve and its color grading, you know you have to utilize a color space transform. And so I have on here in my group pre-clip, I have a conversion from S-Log3 into a DaVinci color space. And then after that, if I go to my group post clip, once again, these are all the things that are happening at the group level. You can see here I have a grade that I implemented. This is like a split tone effect that is in Resolve, which allowed me to kind of get a really quick kind of split tone effect within the overall grade. So if I actually kind of turn that on and off here, you can kind of see how that's affecting this clip overall. So it's really kind of bringing out the kind of cyan colors within the actual grade. I also have here a grain node, and this node has grain, it has halation, and it also has bloom baked into it. Originally, this piece was going to be a lot more filmic, utilizing the grain, halation, and the bloom. However, upon actually just turning it off, I really couldn't get over the sharpness look of it. It just looked so much better, and it kind of like almost did a disservice to the footage that I had. So I opted actually just to completely disable it, but I actually still have it here to kind of be able to kind of go back and forth and kind of see the difference of what it could have been. And that's everything that I had in my group post clip. Then of course at the clip level, this is kind of the typical structure that I had set in place for pretty much every single clip within here. So let's take a look at a different clip here. So if we come to this one, for example, you'll see I have a white balance node, which is labeled WB. I have an exposure node labeled EXP, and then I have a contrast node. And so these are the three nodes that I essentially used for every single clip, pretty much no matter what. These are the three different things that you need to be able to color correct essentially any image. You need to adjust exposure if you need, you adjust your white balance, and then you adjust your contrast. And with those three things, you can pretty much grade and be done with maybe 80% of what the final look will really kind of be. And so if I were to actually just kind of disable everything else, so if we come over to the group post clip, kind of disable everything there, and if I kind of disable everything and we kind of just go one by one, this is what we're kind of starting out with. So first things first is I go and I adjust my exposure. And so that's done in the HDR wheels down here. This is just to help me kind of get, of course, just a nice exposure, nothing really too crazy there. I then adjust my contrast levels. And so this is where then I implement over here on the primaries, where I'll actually adjust utilizing this section here that just says contrast. I did watch some color grading kind of tutorials and stuff like that. I'll link down below the specific channel that I typically kind of gravitate towards, but he had mentioned within a lot of his tutorials when it comes to contrast and stuff like that, he adjusts his pivot to be 0.333. I'm not going to try to explain this too much because I don't really know a whole lot when it comes to this, but check his videos out. He does a really good job of actually dissecting the philosophy and the way he color grades as a colorist. That's just like his full-time thing. That's what he does. So I highly recommend checking out his videos, but he had mentioned that adjusting the pivot to be 0.33 instead of the default number that is set to kind of allows the contrast levels to be representative kind of in a more natural and realistic way. And so I set my pivot to that number, and then I just mess around this slider until I kind of get something that I enjoy. And so if I kind of backtrack here, I now have my contrast. Then from there, I mess with the white balance. Now I opted to, instead of trying to balance the image so that it is a correct white balance, I kind of did a little bit of a shortcut here. I wouldn't fully recommend this. This was just something that I kind of found that once I was messing with the white balance, it was achieving a look that I just personally really liked. And so this is where you don't always have to go with the rules and the ways that in which you watch a tutorial and someone tells you to do something the exact way that they do it. If you are achieving the look that you really enjoy and want within your image, there's really no right or wrong way to kind of get there. If you've achieved your look, then by all means, run with that. And so for me, instead of actually utilizing this node and get a proper white balance for my clip, I instead actually just pushed it in the direction that I wanted it to be. One of the things I did do though is I changed the gamma. So if I right click and go over to gamma, I changed that to linear. That is essentially supposed to be able to allow the offset wheel to be a lot more representative of how white balance is on your camera. And so if I kind of move this around, you can start to kind of see like it's very easy for me to kind of achieve a proper white balance of this clip just by utilizing the offset wheel on my primaries tab. My white balance was essentially kind of dialed in on the day, so there's not really too much for me to do in that regard. But for me, I actually just wanted to achieve the look straight from the white balance. And so if I kind of backtrack a little bit here, you can see where we kind of landed. It kind of got somewhere that I was really, really happy with. This actually has the split tone actually disabled, so let's just re-enable that. You can kind of see the difference that it's making. And so the way I kind of went about this was the split tone was on, and then I went back over to my clip, and that's where I kind of started messing with the white balance until I achieved the look and feel that I really enjoyed, and I kind of landed there. And I did that for every single clip. That was kind of my process. The other thing that I will implement as well, and we'll kind of go to a different clip that introduces this pretty well, is the masking that was done on this. This is really where you can kind of push the envelope in terms of your grade and really kind of extrapolate a ton out of your clip. So as you'll notice in the top right, the node structure is very similar. You have your white balance, exposure, contrast, but then after that you have a bunch of parallel nodes. This is where I was actually able to kind of go in and kind of highlight some of the areas. So if we were to turn on our masks, just so you can kind of see how things are being affected, I have this kind of gradient mask on the bottom That's to kind of darken things down just a little bit here. I utilize the offset wheel just to kind of drop the exposure. We then have this gradient coming from the right, kind of darkening that side a little bit, trying to kind of force the eye to kind of look to a particular part of the frame. And then we finally have a mask on the car, which I kind of just brightened it up just a little bit. And so if we were to kind of now showcase this, kind of turn everything off for a second and kind of go one by one here. So you have the car that kind of just got brought up just a little bit in exposure. If I kind of on off that, I then of course had that tracked so that kind of goes along with the actual car as it goes along, of course. Then you have the gradient that's happening down low. Once again, just kind of drawing the eye kind of upwards to our focus point within the actual frame. And then finally this to once again kind of draw your eye away from this right side and towards the subject matter of this frame in particular. And so with those parallel nodes all kind of playing on this right side, everything then gets mixed together, goes to the group post clip section, which is where the split tone happens. And then finally, you're at the timeline level. At the timeline level, all I really did was I just introduced a little bit of extra sharpening. You always want to add a little bit of extra sharpening at the end so that when YouTube compresses your footage, you're kind of back to normal basically in terms of overall sharpness of your footage. Then after that, there's the color space transform that goes from DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate to Rec 709. And that's essentially how I graded every single one of the colored clips. Now, when it comes to the inverted clips, I kind of just took a very slightly simple approach to this once again. So in terms of structure, I kind of have my saturation, the clip being inverted, and then just a contrast node. And so, of course, saturation set down to 0, nothing crazy there. I then inverted it utilizing the curves. I'm just completely just invert the direction of the curves itself. So if I kind of just redo this, you can see just a black and white clip, inverted, nothing really too crazy there. And then I adjust my contrast to kind of get just a little bit more of a flattering look in terms of the kind of deeper blacks and brighter whites within the frame. And I did that for every single inverted clip. Once again, set my saturation, inverting it, and then messing with the contrast. Really nothing crazy in that regard. If I ever want to introduce a little bit of some denoising of any kind, I will then implement that on the end of the node tree. So once again, for example, in this clip, you have your white balance, exposure, contrast. This is just an extra little S-curve that kind of increase contrast in specific areas. And then I have my denoise as the last node here. But structure-wise, very similar in terms of white balance, exposure, and contrast. Really nothing crazy in that regard. I try to utilize the simplest sort of approach when it comes to color grading. I'm not really at that point where I kind of get really deep into having a crazy node tree and there's like 17 different nodes and every single node is doing something ever so slightly different and it's all stacking together to create this one cohesive image. I like to keep things simple. Through the tutorials that I've watched from the channel that I've linked down below, his philosophy, which I personally align with fully, is to manipulate certain settings to achieve the biggest kind of results. So for me, utilizing just white balance, exposure, and contrast gets me 90% of my final look. After that, implementing the split tone, implementing a little bit of sharpening, and of course having to do the conversions over are all the nodes that I realistically need to achieve an awesome look. I will then sometimes dabble in the masking a little bit, but only when it makes the most sense, only when there is a clear direction that the image wants to go when it comes to the masking. I don't really just do it just because. I do it with intention within the clip itself, like in the one that I kind of demonstrated on where like you have this very clear subject matter, or even in this clip here where you have the cars themselves as the subject matter, the road kind of distracting a little bit, so they're kind of darkening that up a little bit so that your eye is drawn towards the center of the frame. You know, things like that, doing things with intention. And that's really it. Nothing too crazy in terms of the overall color grading process. Again, I am not an expert when it comes to this. I am getting better over time. So these videos will become a little bit more kind of in-depth as time goes on, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of the behind the scenes of how I kind of approached it. And maybe you guys might be able to learn a thing or two when it comes to color grading Resolve. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And yeah, that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been myself, Steven, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Latest. Bye.